June 6th. I fucking hate my therapist. But here we go. Last night I dreamt a little dream about dogs and walking. It was late, a cold winter's night. I was walking in the shadows, close to some trees on the sidewalk. There was barely any light in the street. I could hear the echo of my footsteps as I walked while, somewhere around, in the distance, someone was whistling a tune. I recognized it, but can't remember what it was. I was wrapped, the hands in the ends of my pockets, my eyes watching the floor at all times. And then I heard it, a shriek. A painful shriek in my ears and whatever was making it. I followed the sound. As I approached it, my body trembled more and more in fear. I found it after a second. Or was it a whole day? Two small dogs. No. A dog and a bitch. The male was, but it was doing it as it was a drill, at mad speed. It almost looked as if it was having a stroke. And the female, it was just still there, barely breathing, annoyed, bored. I then realized it was the dog, the one making the shriek. I stood there for some time and walked away, with the same rhythm, at the same pace, not even trying to speed up my escape from that damn sound, almost as if I was enjoying something. As I moved forward, the street distorted before my eyes. First it was a straight line, then it became a sinuous path, and in the end, it was a space paved in loneliness where the buildings dripped toward me, without movement, as if they were frozen liquid. As my steps led me in that stroll where I was a passenger, prisoner of their will, the air around me transmuted into a void devoid of sound. Silence can be deafening. And sure it was. It was for the seconds, the minutes, the hours, days, weeks, months, years I moved there, without purpose or goal. Until the first one broke the emptiness. A bark, followed by 1,000 more. The first came from behind, the rest from everywhere. A legion of dogs calling. Or was it a warning? Maybe they were trying to say something. Run, you idiot. Most likely. Eventually, I don't know how or when, the dogs stopped barking. And there wasn't silence. I remember it well. There was the normal sound of an empty street late at night. The wind blowing in the trees, a car speeding up in the distance. The far-off sound of a siren, that kind of thing. At some point I saw two people, far away, in the corner where two serpentine streets met. One of them was walking a small dog, a chihuahua maybe. He was old, in his 70s, and had the animal on a leash. The other man was about the same age, but he held his dog, a Pekingese, in his arm. He held it as a kid holds his books, as an accessory, or his dead weight. As I got near them, I caught a glimpse of their conversation. No, the man with the Pekingese said. You do what you're going to do, but do it quickly. I still have to see to another 4 people tonight. Then do that. I don't need you, the other said. I stood still, watching and listening from a distance. Saw them part ways, and followed the man with the Pekingese. He made his way into the next street, through the alleyways where the rats feasted on the corpses of several animals. Yes, dogs. All of them. A German Shepherd, a Rottweiler, a Pit Bull. The teeth against the skin, their fur coats chanted a song of desperation and grief, like a broken cello crying the musician's pain. in a tune for the deaf, born from words never said. At the end of the road, there was a river, melted, mixed with the asphalt. The man walked until the water-like pavement was up to his knees. He said something, I don't know what. And then, from somewhere in the darkness that surrounded us, 4 people appeared. Or maybe they were the shadows. Doesn't matter. They got close to him. He dropped his pants. The Pekingese started to whine. He touched his crotch. I didn't want to look, so I didn't. But I heard everything. The man and the other 4 were so happy. But their voices were in the background. I was focused on the dog. That little dog. I swear, I closed my eyes so much it hurt. But still, I was able to taste the pain. I covered my eyes, and the more I pressed, the more sour the taste on my tongue was. And then I woke up. I woke up in a violent state. Came here, naked and sweating. Picked up my journal and my pen. This is what I dreamt last night. There was a 4-person party in my own backyard. I wasn't invited. I was in a closet I don't have in my house. Clothes, shoes, all the things you'd expect to be in a closet were, instead of on a bed. There was a chunk of wood horizontally nailed inside the closet and above a typewriter. Except it wasn't really a typewriter. It was a machine to write by suffering. The keys didn't have inscriptions with the letters. Instead, there was a needle in every single one. Below the keyboard, or whatever it was called, that thing 50 years ago, there was a device to collect blood. My blood was the substitute for the ink. And as I wrote, the keys tore up my skin and pulled it inside the machine. Pieces of my body acted as paper. My muscles were naked up to the elbow. I can still feel the pain as I recall the monotonous, rhythmic noise of those hammers hitting my skin. I remember my own voice, repeating the words I wrote time and time again. They will come. They will come. They will come. They will come. At some point, with the noise of my typing, screams of pain and others' pain came to the soundscape in my closet, like the violins joined the cellos in a string quartet. I think I stood up on my own will, or maybe something pulled me. I walked towards the window. With every step I took, I could feel the machine taking more and more of my skin, almost as if it didn't want me to leave. From the window, I saw them. The party. The 4 of them having fun while they yelled at each other, screaming in pain, bathing in a hole in the ground filled with bodily fluids. The 2 girls were young, 20, 21 years old, not more. Both attractive, black, wearing bikinis, one pink, one blue. The males were a little bit older. One was black, athletic, about 7 feet tall. He was wearing a pair of shorts. The 3 of them were sitting in the hole, with the liquid up to their waists. The other man was white. He had normal clothes and a gray beret. I think he was smoking a joint lying on the grass, outside the hole, cloud gazing. I don't know if he was watching the clouds in the sky or those he made himself with the smoke. I think I was dragged to the party. Or was I pushed? It doesn't matter. The fact is, I was watching from the window, and then I was there, below, in my backyard, staring at them. As the black man stood up and left the hole, as the 2 girls did the same, backing down, away from him, and as the white man joined the other guy, All of them were still screaming. But the girls didn't smile. Not anymore. They were afraid. And with good reason, I believe. The white man smoked in silence, smiling with a smile of 1,000 fangs. As the black man approached the two women, they were crying as he took both of them in his left arm and pulled them against his chest. He looked like a colossus in that moment. He walked as they fought to break free, in vain. They tried to reach the floor, but it was so far away, they were held so far above. The giant went to the pathway. The white man followed him, and I followed all of them. He threw the girls inside a dumpster. They both put their hands together and, as they were filling the dumpster with their tears, prayed to an unknown god for mercy. The giant deity, the giver of life and dead, poured benzene in the trash, the paper boards, the old magazines, the spoiled food, broken toys, lost socks, and the girls. Behind them, the white man watched with a smirk on his face. It looked like an animal walking slowly towards unaware, wounded prey. The black man lit the dumpster on fire. The trash burned, and one of the girls burned with it. Around, the neighbors retreated to their houses, like an army of broken soldiers, retreating not to lick its wounds in the rear, but back home, never to return, giving up on the cause. And I walked away too, another coward hiding in my kitchen, dining as people burned, pretending the smell of their scorched skins was just a piece of chicken I forgot in the oven. When the silence took over the world, a second or century later, I went to the street again. One of the girls was unscathed. The other was badly hurt. The healthy one comforted the other, kissing her disfigured, melted face. The black man had a knife or something similar in his hand. He was going to kill them. Then I stepped in. I asked. I didn't threaten, didn't demand, no. I asked them to be left alone. Because it was my fucking backyard where everything started, and it was my fucking dumpster. I got in an argument with the black man, and the white one joined us. They didn't want to let them live. So I asked, why did they want to kill them? Because they're leaving for the capital, stuff like that, the white guy said. I told him I wasn't going to let them kill them. And so the man with the beret spoke again. If you try to stop us, I'll talk, he said. You have told me such things. I was getting ready for a fight. The black man then looked as if he was 10 feet tall. The other looked annoyed, as if I was just bothering him with something insignificant. I woke up then, and I swear, once I opened my eyes, I could still smell the burnt skin. I could still hear the whining, the gentle kisses on that poor girl, and somehow, I could still see that damn smirk on the white man's face.
I dreamt of a door with a latch in the floor of my garage. It was night. My light bulb was broken. Maybe there was a blackout. I stumbled upon the latch. I knew that wasn't supposed to be there, so I opened it. There was the stairs and there was a weak light. I didn't see where the light was coming from, but it didn't matter. I just took a step down and walked slowly towards the darkness at the end. The tunnel was the entrance to a massive basement. The place was so big, I thought it may have been as wide and as long as my whole neighborhood. There were barrels grouped around the columns, leaking a dark liquid. It was thick and sticky, and it covered the floor. I could feel it on my feet, like the touch, the caress of a hateful lover in the dead hours of the night. When the world goes silent and you, alone with your thoughts, stare at that sleeping naked woman knowing that you're just waiting for the sun, for the dawn, for the moment to kick her out of your bed, of your house of your life, As I walked forward in the basement, barely seeing anything, I found that the place became more narrow with every inch I advanced. There was no more light, no more gloom. After all was pure black. I took my lighter from my pocket and used it as a torch. I was able to keep going until I found another door. It was old and rusty and heavy. It was made of some type of metal. I opened it. Pulling that thing was, as I felt it, the hardest effort I have ever made. There was a corridor at the other side. It was small. After just a couple of feet, I had to bend over a little to avoid hitting the ceiling with my head. And then I heard it. Whispers. Down there. Somewhere along the path. And suddenly I was descending a staircase again. Down while the small flame in my lighter trembled and shook, shifting shape as the winds blew from the guts of the earth, pushed it, forcing it to dance at the rhythm of song made for inhuman ears. Ages of walking went by until I reached the end of the stairs. I had some liquid up to my knees. I realized I was in a sewer. I could smell it. And then the whispers became clearer. I caught some words. Worthless. Want. Nothing. I could see a little of what was floating amongst the shit that came from the city above. The used condoms and the aborted fetuses. The missing keys that had fallen in the drainage and the mementos of my life that Bully threw away so many years ago. I could feel their presence somewhere around. Rats. A legion of them. Ignoring me. Too entertained in their disgusting activities to even notice me, perhaps. I think I imagined them copulating and eating and fighting amongst themselves and against those other things that lurk in the dark. I swear I could see them, paws together, heads up, chanting something that sounded as a prayer, adoring an unknown deity, a ritual to a god made at their own image. And I remember I thought that was the only real god. At least down there, where the leftovers of society fall, and only rise up once the floods come to make us run away from our buildings as the rats run away from us. As I kept moving forward, the sewer around me transformed. The bricks gave pass to the stone that forms the second layer of skin of the world. I was in a cave, and the fluids that fell from above became water. Just clear, fresh water. I took it in my hand. I felt it. Suddenly, I didn't need the lighter anymore. There was some glow on the rock. Maybe some kind of fungus, I don't know. But I could see a little. There was this small, narrow path, growing from the rock itself as a tumor. It was darker than the rest of everything around me. I was in a big, open, circular space. There was a hole above I could see, I think, the sky. And below there was this big, empty, dark space. So I kept descending as the water cascaded into the void. I stopped seeing it, but could always hear it, falling. And at some point, I tripped and fell too, into the void, into the dark, into the unknown. There was a scream from my lungs, followed by the whispers that turned into yelling. I couldn't understand a word of what they were saying. Maybe I didn't want to. At this point, I know I should have woken up. It's what normal people do. But I didn't. I am not normal. The sensation of falling lasted for what seemed like weeks. At some point I was expecting dehydration to kill me long before my body touched the ground. I didn't hit the ground. I just slowed down until 1 second I was in the air, and the next, I was lying on my back in the mud, looking up. In the distance, I still could see the hole and the small light that found its way throughout it. It was my star in the depths. I slowed down my breathing as the yelling intensified. At this point, I didn't care. At all. I knew that the opposite of a birth is not a death. Then I closed my eyes and immediately woke up. I was sitting at my dinner table, and I knew I was asleep. I felt something in my guts, burning. Heartburn, I guess. I had empty dishes all around me. I thought it was the normal feeling after a feast I hated. A maid entered the room. She had a veil on her face, as those used by widows ages ago. The rest of the clothes were typical for a French maid in a pornographic movie, stockings and visible garter belts included. She had a plate in her hands. The woman stood next to me. "Do you want more, sir?" she asked. Then I could see the food. A salad with these small pink things in it. I took one in my hands to see it better and dropped it immediately. It was a finger. A little finger. Small enough to belong to a toddler. "Do you want more, sir?" the maid said. "Do you want more, sir? Do you want more, sir? Do you want more, sir?" "No. Damn it, I don't want any of this." I walked away from the table, from her, from the so-called food. I ran next door to the kitchen. But it wasn't my kitchen. It was a massive room where I imagined 30 or so people should work, in a big restaurant, a hotel or something like that. I was alone there and could still hear the maid talking. "Do you want more, sir?" I had a feeling of dread. I swear I've only felt that way once or twice in my life. I thought I was going to die. I ran around until I found a knife. Rusty with stains of blood on the blade, but useful. I held it out in front of me as I stood in front of the door. Not preparing to attack, but as a warning. Waiting for her as a crouched cat waits for a dog, knowing he will have to run sooner than later. Suddenly, I realized there was more than one door connecting the house with the kitchen. I don't know how I didn't see it before. Maybe those doors weren't there when I first entered. Who can tell? Footsteps, and not a pair, but several came from around. I felt surrounded, and I was. Suddenly, all of those doors opened, and walking in line, many maids entered. All of them with plates in their hands. All of them asking the same damn thing. "Do you want more, sir?" A mundane choir from hell singing the song of the human cruelty. And so I wish I was born deaf and blind, but not mute. My scream broke the night like pain breaking the victims of torture, splitting truths and lies equally, just begging for the cold world to stop, only to be greeted by indifference. I couldn't find the courage to hack through them, as I knew in my heart I wanted to. No. I just ran away again, scared, to the closest room. I closed the door behind me and picked a box that looked heavy. I don't know what it was, but I knew it would be enough to block the door. I was sure, as it happened, that they could not enter. Then I looked behind. I was in a cool store. Meat, and only meat, hanging from chains secured to the ceiling. Not pork, not beef. Human meat. The first I saw were full, fresh corpses. Elders, all of them. In their 80s, some maybe more. Their skins were of a bluish color. The bodies were clean and naked. The faces serene. One, an obese woman with short gray hair, was even smiling. I walked as I heard the maids on the other side, banging on the door, still asking the same fucking question over and over again. As I progressed into the room, the corpses kept appearing in perfect lines, suspended from the ceilings. But with every step I took, they seemed younger and not so happy. At the moment I reached middle-aged bodies, the expression on their faces was serious, worried. And the seriousness and worry gave pass to fear and despair as I reached the young adults. I don't know how to call what I saw in the teens' faces, or the kids. But then, at the end of the room, were those who didn't have a face to twist in a grimace. The toddlers. They were just there, with a hole in their faces. And their hands. God, their hands. They didn't have fingers. None of them. I stood among them in silence, and I felt that burning in my guts again. I guess it never stopped. But then it just became stronger. A fire inside me, a catastrophe trying to reach the outside. The tongues of flames, the desire to lick the open wounds in the hands of despair. As the heat inside grew, the skins lost their blue color and took their natural look. But what is natural once you're dead? Just the alien certainty that you belong to nature and that your remains should feed those things that crawl in the dark, or be devoured by temperature and sterile, impersonal ovens. I knew it then, the king of worms. And I hated myself, for all the known reasons. As the corpses started to quickly rot, as the smell flooded the room and drowned me in repulsion, the certainty of what should happen next hit me. I went to the door, possessed by the demon of calm and peace, the most dangerous spirit in the underworld. I took the box that blocked the door and walked backwards. The legion of maids entered, still chanting, "Do you want more, sir? Do you want more, sir?" I let them come. Then I took the knife and gutted my belly like a fish. The fire escaped through the hole in my flesh. Everything burned, and I burned with everything. As the fire consumed us, I felt for the first time how it is to do the right thing. And there I was, feeling the pain, the fire that purifies. And I only woke up once the flames reached my bones. Last night, I opened my eyes after I fell asleep. There was this noise above, like a bed shaking, moved by the onslaught of a pair of lovers mixing hate with the frozen passion of death running in their veins. I left my bed, still hearing the damn noise. Once I was in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, I realized the sound was coming from outside, from the room, or something. I went downstairs and for a second I felt happy. My house isn't supposed to have a second story. In the kitchen, I prepared my breakfast. And while I was cooking bacon with eggs, spiced with a small ball of human hair that burned away in seconds as I fried everything in dark, thick fluid, I stopped listening. The noise was there, but I didn't care. And then again, once I was at the table, with fork and knife in my hands, with the food in front of me, ready to finally begin the day, the noise bothered me again. I took a bite of the meat. I chewed for several minutes until the bacon dissolved in my mouth. I swallowed and the pork tasted like bleach, but for some reason it was sweet once it reached my stomach. Couldn't take another bite. The damn noise was too much. I took a broom from the closet, went upstairs and hit the ceiling several times. The haters stopped, if only for a second. Then they resumed their copulation, faster, harder, and the more I hit the ceiling, the more they seemed to spread their hate to each other, and the more that bed on my roof moved, scratching the surface of my floor like nails against a skull. Have you ever heard nails against a skull? I put a coat on and went to the garage, where I took out a ladder. Outside it was snowing. As I walked, I remembered that when I was a kid, I used to think that snowflakes fell to earth because the angels were rightfully spitting on us. As I went up the ladder, I thought that a couple of those same angels were there, on my roof, fucking to fuck with me, pulling my short, sensible trigger of a mind. And once I reached the roof, I found nothing, but the noise persisted. And this time it came from below. I could feel it in my feet. The whole house was shaking with rhythm as they made hate to each other. It was an earthquake in miniature, contained in my domains, in my world. I went down as fast as I could. Once I was in my kitchen, I heard the noises on the roof again. I kicked a wall, frustrated, and left the ladder ready on the second floor. Again, the garage, the toolbox in my hand, and then my room. With a hammer, I started attacking the ceiling. It was hard, concrete and steel above me. Just two tools in my hands. The chisel, the hammer. Punch, chisel, hammer. Punch, chisel, hammer, punch. The rhythm of my work was, I realized, the same as them. And I wondered if even that was ruled by their song, where two bodies clashing against each other were the instruments used to play the song of my despair. As the concrete and steel gave in, layer by layer, to my brute force, the noise became louder and louder. The bed screamed in the frenetic movements impressed by it, by the pair of lovers, maddening in its hate. All its hate. At some point I managed to break in. I climbed through the hole I dug, and suddenly it was a vault, with the ceiling for floor. The place was as massive as it was dark. In the middle of the room, 1,000 miles away from where I was, the only light in the room glowed, falling from somewhere above, as a cascade of bright heat. In the glacier cold I walked. It was a journey that lasted months. My clothes became rags as I traveled, sleeping once the exhaustion was close, eating small creatures I was able to hunt in gloom, little things that moved in 6 legs with large snake-like tails. My feet started to bleed after the first couple of weeks, long after the floor shredded my shoes into pieces too small to put together again. I left a trail of blood behind me. I could hear things crawling behind, licking the red stains that signaled my ephemeral passing in their kingdom. I made it to the light. It was lighting a pedestal. On the pedestal there was a bed of meat growing from the marble. A tumor in the surface, and in my bed, them. The two lovers, making hate. Skeletons, formed with the small bones of many different things. Snakes for backbones, chicken's feet for fingers, birds' wings for a rib cage, mice and rats and squirrels for limbs, and babies for heads. Standing there, just in front of them, the bed scratching the pedestal where it grew was, at last, clear as the fog that surrounds reality. It was forming words. "Do you want more, sir?" It hurts, but not as much as my hand holding the hammer. Not as much as my strength in the blow. Not as much as the screams of pain of the two fucking angels I destroyed, their earthly bodies in a swing. Just one swing. I felt the pressure in my arm as the skeletons succumbed, broke. And the pain they felt in all their bodies, I felt in all my body, crushing myself in an act of violence, dwelling in their same hate, possessed by the spirits of those things made of light, pulled under the cascade of heat. Knowing that the darkness should have claimed my corpse, still alive. And then, I woke up. I went to bed early, knowing I was asleep. I was in the company of those voices of the past, the memories of people long lost, those who passed away, those who walked away from life, from my life. Then the phone rang. I took out my cell.
The screen emitted a powerful green light. It blinded me for a second, but I could not answer. It wasn't that phone that was ringing. I should have known. I got up and used the cell to light my way. I didn't know where I had to go, and the house was pitch black at the moment. So I made my way through the labyrinth I called home, walking on a floor paved in time, amidst walls of significance under a roof of memories, breathing the air of ideas. To the center, I said, to the center I will go, to take that call. I found my kitchen. In the middle, there were stairs made of steps floating without anything holding them together. And up I went, as a bird fleeing from human hunters and their bullets, as Icarus crossing into the sun. It was hot up there on the 2nd floor, on the 4th floor, on the 11th floor, on the 23rd floor. I felt the air entering my lungs and igniting them. My blood was boiling inside my veins, cooking me from my own interiors, marinating my organs. I could feel the pain in every piece of tissue in my body, but it didn't matter. I had a task to complete. At some point, I discovered the roof was gone. At some point, I discovered I was in a spiral staircase. I knew then my goal was to reach the summit, where the damn phone was ringing and ringing and ringing. All of that felt familiar. I knew it a second before it happened. I knew it all. Especially when I crossed paths with a tall man who was going down as I was going up. The Giant, I nicknamed him, without any interest of being original. Then the ghosts came, spirits of the living, those I pushed away, sometimes for good reasons. Tommy, a bully I met in elementary school, projected a long, aggressive shadow. I could notice how muscular, tall, imposing that shadow was, as it punched me in the heels, as the kid repeated every single thing he once told me. Oh, those words. Those puerile, basic words. Then the birds came from somewhere in the blackened sky. They sang, they screeched, they said my own words, pronounced so many years ago. Daggers of significance thrown directly at Tommy, cutting the air with surgical precision. Then I had to wonder, who is the bully here? He left. He ran away in tears, and then his shadow lost all the will to fight, all the muscles, all the bravado, and became something tiny, uneventful, gray, a worm begging to be ignored. Struggling just to not get noticed as I stood tall, trying to get noticed by all means. Even when I was aware there was no audience to see my stellar performance of pitiful hate. Then, sometime later, I crossed paths with Mr. Carlson, a teacher who never taught me. Sweetest old fellow you would ever meet. And how sour my army of birds was, surrounding him, shouting at him, making him fragile and weak while he screamed in pain, telling about his adventures as a young man, as a titan, all those exploits reduced to the nothingness my birds brought with them. And Joanna, oh, poor little thing. That anxious body always in movement, not a minute of rest. Those small hands, that small skirt, that small thong. Those whispers in the dark. "I'm afraid," she said. And my birds did not speak. "Please, don't leave," she said. And my birds did not speak. "I love you," she said. And my birds laughed. And they did not even laugh at her. They didn't have such decency. No. And last, I met Richard. He was still bleeding after I was done with him. His mouth, something dark and thick and disgusting was dripping from his mouth, and from his nose, and from his ears. He put his hands on my shoulders, tried to talk, and failed. His tongue fell from his mouth, and my birds descended on it. Bite by bite, they ate it, swallowed it, and defecated it. And then, worms came and ate the manure before it could serve anything resembling an intended purpose. Richard cried as my birds returned to the sky, indifferent. I kept walking. A second later, I reached the summit. The phone was still ringing in a maddened tune that made of one note that always lasted the same amount of time. It was old and rusty. One of those things belongs in museums now with a rotary dial and a cable. I took the call. A woman was talking.
"Thank you for accepting the call. We will connect you with your partner now,"
she said. A melody sounded for a few seconds while I waited. And then someone spoke to me. Another woman. I know her voice, but could not remember her name. She did remember mine.
"Listen, please, listen,"
she said.
"I know you're mad, but I need you now. Dad had an accident. The ambulance can't make it in time, but you're close. Take him, please. I know I don't have the right to ask you anything, but he's bleeding a lot. Please."
She was in distress, and I didn't care. I took the phone and threw it away, to the void where I came from. I stood there, watching as the object fell, as the voice kept ascending and reaching my ears, pure noise, deafening me. I didn't move. I could feel my beard and my hair and my nails growing as the seasons passed by once and again. Always. Always hearing her voice, begging me to help. I was a statue, and I didn't want to be a man. A century or so later, I woke up. There was a bright flash. I don't know where the light came from, but I knew, at that precise moment, I was dreaming. I remember I could hear that flash, for a moment, as a big, loud scramble, as things falling from the sky and hitting the ground. But it was just a moment. Then nothing. I couldn't hear the flash. I couldn't hear anything else, but I wasn't deaf. My heart was working. I could feel the pulse. And when I put down my feet on the carpet, I listened to the contact of my skin with the fabric. It was thunderous, unexpected. I trembled, surprised as a kid watching online his first Screamer video. With equal satisfaction, since that let me know I was safe. It was the others, the rest of the world, not me. Never me. The little things you expect to be in the background, all of the things you've learned to pay attention to once in a while. The birds outside, the footsteps on the sidewalk, the voices from distant conversations, the engines 2 blocks away. None of that was there. And more. The things you've learned to ignore. The gas passing by the tubes in the heat system in your house. The barely noticeable buzz of your light bulb. All of those small noises any house, any building makes. All gone. It was just my body, working. My breath. The air touching my nostrils, the blood pumping in my veins. My stomach destroying the sandwich I ate an hour ago. And then, the world around when I touched it, when I did something. My hand in the latch, my foot as I ran downstairs, my shoulders as I hit a wall trying to get outside. I need to scream and nobody has ears, but I did scream anyway. I did scream as I ran down the streets, and the kids played in the yard, and the cars went by, and the planes roamed the skies as the wind blew in the trees, and I screamed and screamed and screamed, and nobody listened. I stood in front of a man. I yelled at his face. His face. I know he couldn't listen, so I punched him. I punched him so hard I broke his fucking nose. He fell, covered in blood, and cried that soundless crying. And madder I became, and again, and again, and again, I punched him. I disfigured him with my bare hands until there was just a hole there, where there used to be a face that someone called beautiful. Covered in his blood, with his own knuckles bleeding, I ran again. up to the next unfortunate who crossed my path. And again I punched and punched and punched. I made my way in that world devoid of external sounds. Beating, hurting idiots. Leaving a trail of blood and pain and suffering and misery in my wake. Monster the world demanded me to be by refusing to make real my every whim. After painting the floor in red, after walking in the sea of blood I made, with the liquid up to my knees, I met a wall. It was as wide as the world. It reached the sky, and I wanted to go to the other side. So I punched it. I could feel the bones in my hands breaking. That didn't stop me. Someone has to suffer. Someone has to feel it. Am I mad? No. You are mad. All of you. Fuck. Fuck. Fuck! Every single bone in my arms were broken, shattered to tiny little pieces. And as I kept punching, the force pulled them apart more and more with every attempt at tearing down that damn wall. And so, they became thorns, pushed through my cartilage and muscles, through my flesh and skin, flowed as small pieces left my body, and fell to the asphalt. And then I could not punch anymore. I had that wall, that obstacle, stained in red without a single scratch on its surface. And then it came. It was a mumble coming down from above, soft at first. I knew it was a voice that had traveled millions of light years to fall on me, anticipating my disgusting actions eons before my birth. From out of this world, from heaven, the voice of God demanding my answer. From hell, the voice of the devil demanding an answer. From inside my own guts, demanding an answer. And then, as I was looking up to heaven, down to hell, with eyes closed watching my inner me, the mumble grew and became a scream. Not like those I've heard before. It wasn't made of pain or anger or fear. It was made of disappointment. I felt as if it was about to crush me. I could feel the pressure all around, in every inch of my body. And I spoke, I prayed the secret litany known only but those who dwell in perpetual woe, asking and begging, demanding and threatening those creatures from beyond perception to just fucking shut the hell up! It worked. It stopped. Somehow. And then it came, a gentle rain, and washed away the blood on the streets, on my body, on the wall, and I felt fresh and clean, even if it was just for a second. But the world went back to silence. I could only hear, standing there, in a reality empty because I emptied it. The rhythmic flow of air, from the universe to my lungs, back and forth, in a peaceful anger that could explode again at any time. I think I woke up not long after that. June 13th. All of this was real, and I fucking hate my therapist. Today, in what was for sure my last session, I had what is called an epiphany. After all of this writing, this damn journal, making this chronicle of my own nightmares, my own fears, I learned nothing I didn't know, and I have remembered what I want to forget. It was something harmless. I made a joke, and she answered with another joke, and then I remembered. That isolated memory made no sense on its own. But from there, it was just the same old domino effect, I guess. During the next 20 minutes, one after another, the things I saw, I heard, I felt, so many years ago, came back from the depths of my brain to haunt me, to put a mirror in front of my face, keep my eyelids open, my head straight, and yell at me, "See? This is you. This is what you are." I remembered that man. That boyfriend Mom had for 3 or 4 months when I was 5. I remember the pets disappearing in the neighborhood, and their remains appearing in my house. And I remember I saw him with that friend he had, the big guy, the tall man, and how I was supposed to ignore him, but I remember seeing him pulling down his pants and taking the puppies with his hands, and fuck, the crying, all that crying, all the small puppies being... And when Mom was away, I think it was, they gave me so much candy and gave me that soda that tasted funny. I don't know what they put in it, but it made me feel sick and sleepy. But I could not sleep. So I went downstairs and saw them with those 2 girls. And the lighter on her skin. And the crying. All the crying. Always the crying. Please, stop. And then later, or was it before? Those things, those sculptures he worked, all the noise he made creating them, and I asked him what it was, and he said I wasn't supposed to be there, and I just said I wanted to know what was happening, and he slapped me and told me, "Worthless piece of shit, you don't want something unless I say so." And I said nothing, and I did nothing. I should have said. I should have done. And I remember his face and name. And you know it too. Charles Vargas. Yes. That Charles Vargas. Condemned serial killer, Charles Vargas. And when Mom left him and kicked him out of the house, she tried to cheer me up and took me to dinner to this fancy place, and I was crying because I thought they were feeding me a dog. And the waitress just said, "Do you want more, little sir?" "No, damn it. I don't want more. I want to go home." Oh, God. And then she got this other boyfriend, and I would hear their bed scratching all the time, and I covered my ears, but I could still hear them. Moving, talking, dirty talking, and I can still hear them. Fuck! And I think I remember all those things. All those times I was cruel with everyone. Poor Joanna. She was just a kid, as I was back then. And she just wanted to love me back, and I just wanted to get laid. I'm such a jerk. And all that violence that came later. All those fights. Most people, past a certain age, avoiding fights like they avoid the pest, but I forced them. I forced them by just punching them. All those broken bones, mine or otherwise. All that pain I created. Why had nobody listened when I wanted to speak? Why? 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 Those weren't dreams. Damn it. Those were just memories. The creature, the perfect enemy I've been chasing all my life. It was always me. I am a fucking cliché. For another story, tune in next Tuesday. Meanwhile, watch another video. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Check the description for our social media. And sleep well.
If you can.